Hello my friends, today we will be revisiting a very popular topic, which is a comparison of the latest iPhone and a compact camera. In this video it will be the iPhone 12 Pro and Sony ZV-1. 12 Pro has a couple of upgrades that could help it a lot in this comparison. Those are mainly the Pro RAW 10-bit video capture, improved HDR processing and the new lens. Sony ZV-1 finally combines the latest 1-inch sensor with 24 to 70mm lens and a hybrid autofocus system. It is a completely different league than the G7X3 that I've compared to the iPhone 11 Pro. In this video we will take a look at the performance and the feature set of 12 Pro and ZV-1, and I will try to help you decide which one is more suitable for you. Let's start with the physical attributes and the convenience. The main advantage of the iPhone is that if you own one, you probably carry it all the time and it is always at your disposal. Any other camera will always be an extra thing to carry around, so it basically has to be worth carrying. Some say that the best camera is the one that you have with you, and I definitely agree with that, as long as that camera is Sony A1. According to the comments under the original comparison, a lot of users simply want their camera to be a separate device. Other users appreciate that the iPhone is ready to edit and post the content online without the need to transfer it to another device. The handling is not a particular strength of 1-inch compact cameras, but you will still get a dedicated shutter button, command dial, and a couple of nicely positioned function buttons. The ergonomy of any smartphone for photographing or shooting video is just poor, there is no other way around saying that. 12 Pro is a bit better than most smartphones thanks to the flat edges that give you more surface to hold to. The whole user experience is kind of saved by the display, which is fantastic on the 12 Pro, and it makes the whole shooting process much more bearable. One way to greatly improve the smartphone shooting experience is to use a special case, grip, and ideally a shutter button such as this Polar Pro Light Chaser Pro. Before we get to the image quality comparison, I have to stress that the perceived difference always depends on the viewing device. Looking at the pictures on a large 4K monitor is something completely different than looking at a smartphone screen. The biggest difference in the output is still caused by the sensor size and the optics. ZV-1 uses so-called 1-inch type sensor. That is a relatively large sensor, and it is more than 4 times larger than the sensor in iPhone 12 Pro's main camera. That means that it can use much larger area to capture the light. It also uses a much larger lens. The biggest difference in the output is just the overall look. The images taken by a large sensor look more natural. They capture more natural detail, which means that the 1-inch sensor already requires much less digital sharpening. The pixel density on this 20-megapixel 1-inch sensor is also much lower, which means that it is less demanding when it comes to the lens quality. The main camera in iPhone 12 Pro uses a much smaller 1/2.3-inch sensor and a pretty small lens. For this size, it shoots great images. The overall size-to-performance ratio is outstanding. That smartphone look associated with high amount of digital sharpening is still there though. That is one of the aspects of smartphone photography that is not really possible to get around at this stage of technology. On the other hand, Apple was able to fully get around the dynamic range issues. Apple ProRAW is nothing short of amazing. This is basically a very smart image stacking which happens seamlessly and with no delay. The result of this is that the RAWs capture an immense amount of dynamic range with virtually no noise. I will talk about that in a separate video. Sony ZV-1 uses the most modern 1-inch sensor, which means that it also has very solid dynamic range. At lower ISO values, you can recover a lot of information in both highlights and shadows, so it gives you a lot of flexibility. Thanks to the BSI technology, it is actually very close to larger Micro Four Thirds sensor in good light, and the bright lens helps a lot in the low light. I would say that the low light is still better on the ZV-1. The iPhone can significantly decrease the noise if you use Pro RAW and edit the pictures, but you need to use long exposure, which is not very convenient. The lens on the iPhone may also have some issues with ghosting in the low light. Another big difference is the implementation of HDR. This is again picture stacking, which increases dynamic range. It basically means that the highlights in your pictures won't be too bright and the shadows won't be too dark. The iPhone 12 Pro does so in a very impressive way. The biggest improvement over the older iPhones is that the HDR processing on the 12 Pro is more tasteful in a lot of situations. HDR is generally a matter of taste. General public seems to like details preserving but unnatural HDR processing a lot. On the other hand, advanced photographers, filmmakers, or cinema enthusiasts usually consider this to be a rather cheap look. Sony ZV-1 shoots the usual standard dynamic range video. It has very nice colors, just like all new Sony cameras, and it actually looks distinctively different from the smartphones, which is kind of the point, I guess. Regarding the field of view or the zoom range, that is another big difference. The iPhone has an ultra-wide 13mm equivalent camera, 26mm wide-angle camera, and 52mm telephoto camera. This setup offers a lot of versatility, but the image quality is not equal. The telephoto camera is very decent, but it uses a smaller sensor and a darker aperture, so it is noticeably worse than the main wide camera. The image quality on the wide-angle camera is not great, especially not on a large screen. The ultra-wide camera is kind of supposed to compensate for that by offering very dramatic field of view, which is exactly what it does. Sony ZV-1 has a classic 24 to 70mm full-frame equivalent lens. Optically, it is very decent for this type of camera. It is a very versatile range, suitable for everything from landscapes to portraits or product photography. On ZV-1, you can naturally use all of the focal lengths between the 24 and 70mm, which is a big advantage of the zoom lens. Regarding the video, that was the biggest difference in my previous comparison. This time it is a very different story. Unlike the Canon G7X Mark III, Sony ZV-1 shoots proper full-sensor downsampled 4K video. The video quality comparison is very similar to the conclusion from the stills. ZV-1 shoots more naturally looking classy video, whereas the iPhone uses its processing power to get absolutely everything out of those small sensors. An advantage of the iPhone is that it can also shoot 4K in 60p. For color grading, I still prefer Sony ZV-1. The iPhone can actually shoot 10-bit video, but the ZV-1 has better signal-to-noise ratio and excellent picture profiles. If you intend to use the footage with no color editing, Sony ZV-1 is also highly suitable for that. I still think that the iPhone 12 Pro is one of the best consumer video cameras. The amount of details is very good for this type of camera, and the sharpening is set pretty reasonably. Just like with the stills, the HDR is very tastefully done most of the time. It even shoots Dolby Vision, so if your TV set supports Dolby Vision metadata, you can get a very nice HDR experience. As I've said, it is mostly about which look you prefer. The autofocus on the iPhone is excellent. There are only a couple of cameras out there that can beat the iPhone autofocus, and the ZV-1 is actually one of them. Together with Sony a7C and a7S III, it is the best focusing camera that I've ever tested. With 0.02 seconds acquisition time, it is the fastest and 100% accurate. In video, it works just as well, but it is important to set the autofocus track sense and the drive speed according to your preferences. Real-time eye tracking in video is an incredible piece of technology, and honestly, it gets me every time I test any Sony camera that can do it. Having said that, you definitely won't have any autofocus issues with iPhone 12 Pro. It is very fast and reliable with no hunting. The only thing that I could complain about is that the autofocus is not adjustable, but the default settings are fine for all-round use. Regarding the stabilization, that is more effective on the iPhone, but there is one issue, and that is the crop. The iPhone has lens stabilization on wide angle and telephoto lens, but most of the video stabilization is done digitally. It works incredibly well. Combined stabilization makes the static shots look basically like on a tripod. The walking sample on an uneven surface is just shocking for me. I would have easily guessed that this was shot on a gimbal, which is not the case as you can see in the shadow. Electronic image stabilization on the ultra-wide camera is great as well, and more than sufficient for that ultra-wide angle. Telephoto camera uses optical image stabilization and it is very effective as well. Overall, the stabilization is a huge strength of all three cameras, but especially on the main camera. The lens stabilization on ZV-1 is also very decent. It is a very light camera though, so for maximal stability, I recommend using active mode. This is an optical stabilization combined with digital stabilization, and that one is also very efficient. Unfortunately, the crop in active mode is pretty significant, just like with the iPhone. One area in which the iPhone destroys any camera on the market is the display. The pixel density of the 6.1-inch OLED display is 460 pixels per inch, and the maximal brightness is 800 nits in SDR mode and 1200 nits in HDR mode. It is a great display overall, with very accurate color reproduction, and it is simply nice to look at. There is not much more to say there. ZV-1 uses a well-known 3-inch 921,000 dot panel. In this category and at this price point, it is pretty adequate display, but nothing special to be honest. The brightness and the sharpness is sufficient and it is completely fine to use. Unfortunately, it will dim when switched to 4K video mode. The display is fully rotatable, which is a good choice in this case because it is also supposed to be a vlogging camera. It also has a hot shoe and mic input, and those will not block the screen. That is a big advantage for the vloggers. There is no viewfinder, but I think that it is a good choice in this case because of the hot shoe and also cost savings. The battery life is a weakness pretty much with every compact camera. ZV-1 battery is rated for 260 shots or 75 minutes of continuous video shooting, which is okay for this category. The battery can be charged in camera, but unfortunately it uses an old micro USB and there is no excuse for that. As I was testing the iPhone camera, I managed to take about 250 photos in a day, a couple of video clips. I use the phone normally for other tasks while being connected to 4G network, and I still had about half of the battery left. The only thing that drains the battery a lot is the Filmic Pro, but that is to be expected. To sum up, as expected, there won't be a winner this time. In my opinion, it is important to consider two main things when choosing between the compact camera and a smartphone. The first one is the convenience. Some users like to have everything in one device, others prefer having a separate camera with dedicated controls and other stuff. The second thing to consider is the look that you prefer. Sony ZV-1 offers a more natural, classic look and ultimately more details. iPhone 12 Pro uses clever features to provide very nice output using state-of-the-art computational photography. It actually does so in a very tasteful way most of the time. One more thing that I have to say is that the Sony ZV-1 and Sony RX107 are in my opinion currently the only two compact cameras that are worth buying. As I've explained in my 2019 version of this video with G7X3, smartphones have replaced most of the compact cameras and there is a good reason for that. Sony is basically the only manufacturer that puts state-of-the-art technology into compact cameras. I'm generally very happy with the iPhone 12 Pro. Especially the ProRAW and 10-bit video are big improvements. It provides very nice output which fulfills the requirements of the general public. Having said that, I think that there are reasons to get a compact camera in addition or instead of a high-end smartphone for some users. Overall, I think that both are great devices, and I can highly recommend both Sony ZV-1 and iPhone 12 Pro. So that's it for this video, thank you for watching, I hope that you liked this video and that you found it to be useful. Stay tuned for more videos and maybe consider subscribing if you don't want to miss my future content. I appreciate your feedback in form of thumbs up or thumbs down. If you would like to ask anything or share your opinion, please do so in the comment section, and see you next time.